Time now for a la carte. For today's edition, our correspondent Emmanuelle Chaze is back from reporting at the border between Poland and Ukraine. Now, as a reminder, of course, Poland has taken in over half of the nearly 4 million refugees that have fled the country since the start of the war. Good morning, Emmanuelle. Welcome back.
Good morning.
So you arrived to the border on February 27th, just 3 days after the start of the invasion. What were your first impressions?
Well, the first impression was of a very eerie scene in front of me in the road connecting Poland to Ukraine. When I arrived 3 days after the start of the conflict, there was initially nobody. So it was a road that's usually very busy, and it was completely empty, bar a few people with their trolleys, with their suitcases, and some cars coming in from Ukraine, and even the cars looked completely worn down. They were completely covered in mud, and people who I was seeing probably hadn't slept for days. They looked completely exhausted. We see here this old woman who had just crossed the border in Medica. She was 20 meters into Polish territory, and she was looking back at her country, and she stayed there. She stood there for like 10 minutes with all her belongings in that trolley, and that's the kind of scenes that I've witnessed over the weeks I was at the border. You know, very, very strong scenes, and a lot of despair from people who were there.
Well, speaking of despair, Emmanuelle, unfortunately, what were some of the other things that you heard from Ukrainian refugees themselves while you were there?
They left in a hurry. They left very hastily. They just brought their most important belongings in backpacks. They came with very little. Some of them came with pets, and it was we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who hit the road to leave. 90% of them are actually women and children. Most of them, the vast majority of them, are Ukrainians, but there were also foreigners who were trapped in Ukraine when the conflict started, who were also trying to find a way out. And unfortunately, there were a lot of racist incidents reported at the border on both sides. And the foreigners I could meet actually were met by representatives of their embassies, and they could make it through. But that was not the case for everyone. And for the Ukrainians I met, I was talking to that woman from Luhansk. She had already had to leave Luhansk in 2014 to settle in central Ukraine, and once again she had to take the road of exile. And maybe we could listen to her. Her name is Ina.
Now
that we're here, I'm glad to have met these people. They suggested we go to Spain. I want to go, and really there's nothing that prevents me from going. In Luhansk, we lost everything. I had a shop, we had a big house, I was a businesswoman. Now I have nothing left. I want to go somewhere. I just want to go back to work. That doesn't scare me.
It's also hard, Emmanuelle, to imagine leaving your home and not even knowing if it's going to be there when you get back. So as we've seen then, Poland has taken in the vast majority, over 2.2 million Ukrainian refugees. What's the situation like in the reception centers that you visited? How are they evolving? How are they adapting?
Well, the Polish authorities are overwhelmed, and understandably so. It's the first time there's such a humanitarian effort that's being done. People are also being hosted by Polish families who opened up their houses. Restaurants offer meals for free for Ukrainians. Ukrainians can also use public transports for free. They also have access to the job market already. Some of them speak already Polish, because there's a community of Ukrainians based in Poland, and that was the case before the conflict. There were already 2 million of them, so there's a lot of networking being done in the community that was already there, and the Ukrainians coming. But to give you an idea, the capital, Warsaw, has seen an increase of its population of more than 15% within a single month. So the Polish authorities are calling on the international community to help with this humanitarian crisis unfolding on its territory.
Now, speaking of the crisis, Emmanuelle, it's led to an outpouring of solidarity, not only from Polish institutions, but also from individuals, humanitarian assistance coming from all over the world, really. How are aid workers able to organize their actions?
It really depends on the checkpoints. For example, the checkpoint we're seeing here is Medica. It was relatively well organized in that all the NGOs who came here are well used to that kind of setup. So there would be a morning meeting meeting every day between representatives of each NGOs, with even the United Nations coming later than some other NGOs, some NGOs, and apologizing for it. That tells you a lot about the situation. There's other checkpoints, though, where things are not so well organized, and this also gives way to the possibility for human traffickers to be present. And because there's a population which is mostly a vulnerable population, 90% of the refugees are women and children and elderly people. This is something we really have to watch out.
All right, Emmanuelle Chaze, thank you so much for that reporting. Welcome back.
Thank you.